Hey guys, I want to give a quick shout out to the sponsors of the channels, Dueling Guard, Sleeve Chief, and Imperium Duelist. Check them out in the description box down below and use code SAKO for discounts on all of them. Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Today I'm coming at you guys with a hand trap tier list for the 2025 NAWC Nationals metagame, and really what hand traps I think will be played and how I feel about each and every single one. Let's go ahead and get straight into the video. We're going to start off with Retaliating C. This card's really unique. It has a really funny interaction into the next format, but I don't think yet it's very good. It does have some funny interactions, like versus Memento. I think this card's very good, but right now it's probably just not the best option for us. I'm going to go ahead and put it down here in not good enough. This basically pertains to right now. In the future, it could definitely be good. All cards change from good to bad, but right now it's just not good enough, so we're going to stick it there. Moving on, we have Lancea. I think Lancea is a phenomenal card. If we look at the tier list that I posted previously, I think that 2 out of the 4 best decks right now, it's going to be Malice as well as Lunalight. Lancea has a fantastic matchup into both of those decks there. Obviously, versus Malice, it's like a pretty severe floodgate. They can still play through it if they open backup, or if they open like Wizard, some sort of extension to the Cybers package of their deck that doesn't really use the Malice engine itself. But besides that, into the Lunalight matchup is going to stop them from using Wolf, Perfume, Serenade Dance, a lot of different key interactions for actually continuing and extending their plays. Do keep in mind that Lancea does give them a few extra funny plays, like they are able to link away their Yellow Martin without being at risk of losing it forever because they are into Lancea, but it's still way more of a hindrance than it is as a help to them. But this card is phenomenal and should definitely be in your side decks for the NAWCQ. Moving on, we have Ash Blossom. Ash Blossom is, of course, always going to be a staple. This card is the best hand trap in almost every situation. The fact that we are not only playing a hand trap that is diverse in terms of what can hit, it can be used on certain disruptions in the format, it can be used as a way to prevent disruptions from coming around, but it can also be used as a way to counter your opponent's non-engine. Things like Metaltronus, things like Dominus Purge, Songs of the Dominator, things like even the Mulcharmies, being able to use your non-engine to counter theirs is absolutely fantastic. So Ash Blossom will almost always remain at the top of this list here, even if it's not directly affecting people's engines. Then we have DD Crow. I actually think DD Crow is very, very well suited for this national season. Being able to use this on cards like Mitsurugi Ritual, or even on like Earth Monsters. So if they're playing against the Ryzeal deck that plays the Dodo Warrior, being able to use this on Glove to stop its extension from the graveyard, make them commit other cards is very, very unique. You also see this deck played in a lot of decks like Vanquish Soul, things that need certain attributes to reveal. I guess that's just Vanquish Soul, but yeah, a lot of Vanquish Soul decks will be playing 3 DD Crows. If you saw that in the spreadsheet, that is one thing that is in my Vanquish Soul list personally. If you want the spreadsheet, you can check it out down below. It's got all of the decks that are going to be pretty much played into the NAWCQ formats, all the new decks at least. But DD Crow is one of the more popular cards that you'll see going around. It's also really, really good into the mirror match. When they link off the Raisin and go effect of Rock to add it back to hand, being able to Crow there is really important because it's going to banish their fire monster. And it's really hard for that deck to continuously circle their fire monsters if they lose their first access to Raisin. It's really difficult for them. Moving on, we have Dimensional Shifter. I think Shifter's unique right now because it does have matchups where it just blows it out of the water. Right, like if we play against Memento and we shifter them, it is cooked. It is chopped. They are gone. Same thing for Lunalight. It's pretty hard for that deck to play underneath Shifter, but it's the thing with Shifter is it's a one-of, right? So you have to build your deck to play things that don't conflict with the one-of Shifter to begin with, but also a lot of decks can still play through it. Like Ryzeal Mitsurugi is still getting to a Detonator through this a lot of the time. A lot of them, they can even get to like Prayers and Murakumo. Murakumo can activate when it's banished, so you're really not losing too much there, and the Detonator on top of it's definitely not hard to get to at all. It does hinder their starters because they can't start with X Ryzeal, and so that's kind of a hindrance to them. But besides that, like Shifter's really not fully stopping their turn, and it's a one-up to begin with that forces your deck to build in a weird way. In the future, I think the Shifter is such a broken card that it'll probably get banned, but right now it's just not meta impacting enough for me to put it down in these super broken spots. Let me rearrange this real fast so we can talk about all of these Dominus cards in a row. I think that Impulse is a phenomenal card. It's definitely not as mandatory as Lancea, but with so many decks in the format being able to play this, specifically Lunalight and Malice being able to play this card, and pure Mitsurugi, there's even some like pure Malice, not even pure decks. I am so sorry. There is some Mitsurugi Ryzeal list that I have seen that side deck Impulse, and they're basically taking out a large amount of the Ryzeal cards going second to go ahead and put Impulse in. Just to have this card's unique approach and interaction into every game state. The fact that it can be a board breaker, it can be like a specific hand trap that's hard to interact with, can't be called by it is phenomenal. And as you go later into the game, it becomes just a better interaction because it also destroys is phenomenal. I think that right now, if your deck can play Impulse, you should. A very unique thing about Impulse for the Lunalight deck is that the only light monsters your deck really plays, it's Wolf and Lunalight Tiger. Both of those monsters are light. However, their pendulum effects they're using of them. So while they're in their scares, they'll actually spell cards. So you can use them. Even if you Impulse your opponent, you can activate Tiger as many times as you want, as long as you're using the pendulum effect of it, because that's a spell card. So really cool thing there. Moving on, we have Dominus Purge. Dominus Purge is a very unique card as well. I think if your deck could play Dominus Purge, it should. But to be honest, there are better options for hand traps. I think it's still a fantastic card, but it's definitely not good enough to push itself into mandatory because, I mean, to be honest, Dominus Purge just doesn't stop everything like Dominus Impulse does. Dominus Purge is going to be really good into the Ryzeal cards, whereas Impulse is going to be really good into the Malice cards. The thing is that Impulse will always be good or always used at some point versus the Ryzeal cards, where it might not be the same for Purge. Purge might not always be used into the Malice cards, like at all. It might have 0 times to be activated if they're doing their combo in a specific way. So that's something to keep in mind. The other cool thing with Purge is that you can technically use this on like really broken things. Like you can use this on MTP aggressively, whereas Purge you can't. But I think that Purge is more of a diverse card. That's why I put Purge. Or sorry, I think the Impulse is more of a diverse card. That's why I put Impulse a little bit higher than Purge. Purge kind of does the same thing as Ash Blossom, but not in every regard. Then we have Songs of the Dominator. I think this card's really cool. And honestly, I am rooting for this card to get better and better. And I think that with Yummy coming out, that card will see a lot of play. Being able to use that card to search for the Dominus Purge your deck is already playing is phenomenal. You basically get more forms of interaction as you progress your turn. So like, you're going to play a lot of things in Yummy. You're going to play Fuallos. You're going to play Purge. You're going to play Songs of the Dominator, Imperm. A lot of these things that are going to be like hand traps. They don't really play into your opponent's interactions. They're going to be hand traps that are either done early in the turn or they're going to be done at a point where your opponent can't really interact with them. So called by is not really going to be effective versus a lot of your hand traps, as well as things like Crossout aren't really going to be effective because them putting those cards in their deck, specifically for like Songs of the Dominator and for Fuallos, going first is going to make their deck worse simply by putting it in their deck just for the Crossout. So having things like that are very unique. But Songs of the Dominator is also a really cool one because it makes your like grind game a little bit better. Being able to activate this card and search for another disruption if you go into a grind game is phenomenal because that means they're never top decking out of your situation. The cool thing with this and Yummy and why this is played in Yummy is because none of those cards really activate in your hand or grave, and so you're able to continuously extend without falling into the restrictions of this card. Then we have Effect Veiler. If you guys didn't know, this is the alt art for Effect Veiler. I think this card's really good right now. I think it's probably better than the Purge, to be honest. The cool thing with Veiler is that it's really good, specifically into Lunalight Gold Leo. I think that's the TCG name for it and the OCG name. But the thing that makes this different from things like Imperm is the fact that it's a monster effect, not a spell or trap. Whereas in a lot of the combos, they're going to set up a spell trap negate before they summon their Gold Leo to play around things like Imperm. Veiler kind of bypasses that. The only thing with Veiler is it does play into Call by the Grave, but another neat interaction with Veiler is if you're playing a deck with Bystials, being able to use your Bystial to make the Veiler dodge Call by is really important, as well as it does set you up for the body if you need it at some point in time. But I do think Veiler is actually very slept on for this game, for this format. If you use Veiler to cut off like some decks Ryzeal cards and then a Bystials to cut off another part of it, it's really good. If you use Veiler to cut off their Malice engine, it's going to take a unique extender for them to push through that. And honestly, Malice is starting to cut down on its engine a little bit, so they're not all playing GWC anymore, right? It's pretty much the standard 20 Malice cards. No one really changes that, but Veiler is still pretty impactful because now they have less of those cards to extend through it. Moving on, we have Fantasme. This card's sick. It's super cool. If you're playing Vanquish, this card should absolutely be in your side deck. And honestly, it's definitely a card to consider no matter what deck you're really playing right now. The card is just very unique in nature, being able to cycle your hand, put back the cards you're not necessarily wanting, put back the duplicates that you're like looking for in order to get exactly what you want. It basically gives you a sculpted hand. The only problem with Fantasme is it can get ashed, and it does conflict with some of your hand traps, like if you're playing things like the Mulcharmies in your deck, which I'm pretty sure everyone is going to be doing that if you have them, you know. It does make those kind of dead draws to get into. Same with these cards down here, Gamma and Delta, but we'll talk about those later. The main thing is if you're playing a lot of hand traps in your deck, I think that Fantasme is a very, very optimal card to play. It's going to be good into almost everything in the format. So we've got pure Mitsurugi. Even some of the Ryzeal Mitsurugi lists are starting to lean towards more of a pure Mitsurugi approach to it, where they're playing like pre-preparations in their deck, and they're making an IP before they really continue playing their turn a little bit more. They've got Malice. It's obviously very good versus Malice. Even Vanquish Soul, they are making rock every single time. I think it's not a bad idea to bring Vanquish Soul, to bring Fantasme into Vanquish Soul, because it's giving you basically a hand mulligan and one additional body to play with for free against that deck. So that's another cool thing. The other good interaction with Fantasme is, depending on the deck, this card is going to have value not only when they're going first and they play their turn out, but you can also use this card like on turn 2. So if my opponent sets up a board and it's got like an IP on it, searching or having that Fantasme is going to be fantastic, because if it gets Ash somehow on that IP summon, then whenever my opponent uses IP, I can drop it again on my turn. Depending on if it's different turns, because Fantasme is a hard once per turn card. But if they somehow stop the Fantasme, I can drop it again on the next one. Then we have Belle. I really truly think that Belle is not good enough. A lot of the Vanquish Soul lists that you see will be playing Belle just because it's an attribute that lines up with their deck strategy. The only difference with it is that it's an Earth. Vanquish Soul's mainly needing, if you look at like the lists that are doing well and the lists and what really is needed inside of that deck, you need Fires and Darks. And there is like some cards that need Earth to go ahead and get their additional effects. But to be honest, having Belle is just playing more cards that already overlap with what you were doing, right? So things like Crow and Bystials, you already have cards that kind of serve the purpose of Belle. And so you don't need to play more cards like that, especially if this is going to be the worst one out of those, and when it's one that is one of the least helpful attributes for you. It still helps because it's Earth, but it's definitely not needed. Ghost Ogre. I think the Ghost Ogre is a little bit better than some people are giving it credit for. I'd probably put it right behind Fantasme. Ghost Ogre is really cool. Has some niche interactions versus Malice. Being able to Ogre a Link 2 makes it really hard for the deck to climb up and extend. The only thing is that in some of the game states, like if they open Chessy Cat or any sort of 2-card combo, basically the first Link they're making is Wicked. And then from there, your Ogre is going to be pretty mid-impactful from that point going forward. Into Mitsurugi Ryzeal, Ogreing the Duo Drive is even better now because they're starting to cut down on names. A lot of them aren't playing 7th Tachyon anymore. So now the only names they're really going to be playing is 2 Ice, 2 X'd. Some play 1 sword, but let's just say two swords for the math of it, and then 1 bonfire. A lot of the time, the way they're getting to their Ryzeal cards is with making Duo Drive. They're using their other Mitsurugi names to get to 2 level 4 bodies, whether it's Night Sword Serpent, or if they're using prayers to summon back a name and normal summon one from hand. They're using that to really get them to their 2 level 4 bodies. Being able to Ogre the Duo Drive there and cut off that access is pretty decent. The other deck that this is, I guess it's both of them, but Lunalight, it's very, very good versus Lunalight. Being able to Ogre their wolf kind of traps it over in the extra deck. It's kind of hard to get that free. The only way to really get that free is with the effect of Black Sheep. Black Sheep, when it's fusioned with, can add from over there. But if we're able to Ogre that, it's going to cut them off of a wolf a lot of the time. And with Vanquish Soul, whenever they do their Vanquish Soul combo, when they get to start, if you Ogre their start, it's not only going to cut off that 1 search, which is going to be an extension from them, it's also going to cut off the trap card in the end phase. And we're basically trading 2 things with just 1 interaction of the Ghost Ogre. So I think that's really phenomenal there. Moving over, we have Cherries. I'm not even going to talk about it. That card's horrible, will almost always be horrible. Even in Tier Limit format, when we were looking at only 1 deck being played, this card still was not good enough. Because if a deck is so good that it's become meta relevant in Tier 1, it's not going to be crutching so hard on 1 individual card and will most likely have a workaround. So I think this card will almost always be irrelevant for this point moving forward. Who knows? They could come out with different cards that change that. But for the time being, this card's definitely horrible. Moving on, we have Imperm. I think that Imperm is a really cool card because obviously it was like the first sort of trap that was a hand trap. First one you could activate from your hand to really be impactful during your opponent's turn. The only thing with Imperm is that you have to specifically have no cards on your field. Different than Impulse, where your opponent has to have a card, you have to have no cards. And so Impulse is becoming slightly worse because it's making you use that interaction first, since we're playing so many different hand traps that summon now. Things like Gamma, Delta, Nibiru, Bystials, Fantasme, things that like put themselves on your field to kind of like interrupt your access to that. But on top of that, like if you're going first now, your hand traps aren't hidden in your hand. You're having to set this card. And even though it does get a little bit of an additional effect, which could be really good into some decks like Lunalight, because obviously Pendulum Columns, if you put your Imperm in it, you Imperm the Pendulum Column, it's going to shut off that 1 Pendulum Column. So this could have really good implications versus the Lunalight deck. honestly, it does open you up to things like Lightning Storm and Harpies and things that would like counter that Imperm, especially into a grind game situation. The other thing is a lot of times in order to play the game, you're having to like normal summon monsters or like not even to just play the game, but to go into like something like a Typhon to control the game state. You need a monster you can just put on your field, and Imperm doesn't do that. However, Imperm is going to have almost everything else that Valor has going for it, and so I'm going to put this slightly below Valor. But just know that Imperm does have interactions that Valor does not. Things like drawing this for your turn, or using this in the draw or standby phase, or even in the end phase, battle phase, whatever you want. Things that Valor does not have, Imperm has going for it. But I think right now it's kind of shifted with the pros and cons because of what decks are in the meta and what cards are getting played, to where I think that Imperm has become slightly worse than Valor at this point in time. Moving on, we have Fuallos, and all of the Mulcharmies, really. I'm going to go ahead and put Fuallos up here in mandatory. I think this card is more needed than Lancea is, honestly. This card is crazy. I can't imagine myself entering an event without Fuallos in my deck. It's going to cover every single matchup at least a little bit. You know, even if I'm playing the Vanquish Soul, a deck that primarily summons from the hand and only summons 4 times really most of the time, I'm still going to keep in Fuallos, because what's going to happen is it's going to force them to take a different route and make their board suboptimal, even if I am not drawing any cards, right? So let's think of it like this. Because I Fuallos them, they may not even go for Rock. They may not use the effect of Holy Suit to summon from their deck. That's 2 things that we just cut off, and I basically just lost 1 hand trap for it, you know? It's so much of a fear factor for them that it's really worth playing, especially into the Vanquish Soul deck, because if they do decide to ash it, because less experienced players with the Vanquish Soul deck may actually consider ashing the Fuallos, even though they need that fire monster to be in their circulation. They may consider ashing it, and it may mess them up that way. But I think the Fuallos is still an absolutely fantastic card into this metagame. Nothing really changed from last time. However, I do think that Pirellia has pushed up even more since the last format. Before we were playing this, because it definitely hit Ryzeal, it hit Mitsurugi, it hit Malice, it hit all of the decks at least a little bit, you know, to where you're getting 1 or 2 draws. 2 decks have been added to this format: Lunalight and Vanquish Soul. Now, if you play Lunalight, I would not recommend keeping this card in. Lunalight, realistically, depending on their hand, can give you 0 draws and then on double Liger SP with a Nib in their hand. That's off 0 draws. If you do this and they do 1 draw, I think they can change that that SP to an IP if they want to give you a draw. But realistically, you're never really getting any draws against that deck. But here's the cool thing with Vanquish Soul, is that versus Vanquish Soul, you can put this card in when you're going first, but you can also put this card in, or when you're going second, but you can also put this card in when you're going first, right? Being able to start your turn with standby phase, drop Pirelli on your own turn, kind of hinders them from being able to do things like Holy Sue, Bystials, Fantasmes. Even if they play Nib, which most people are not, it's now putting a hindrance on a lot of the hand traps they play in their deck, because if they do play, you're going to get a draw off of them with Fuallos. And I think that's really, really cool, honestly, that you're able to get some protection on your own turn from them being able to unfair you out of the game. So Pirellia is definitely something unique that you should keep in mind, especially versus the Vanquish Soul deck. Now, Meows, I think that this card has absolutely tanked, and I really don't think this card is even worth playing. I think that it is... Actually, no, let's put it below Belle. Belle is unique versus Malice in the sense that it can end their turn when they start with exactly field spell. Meows, you can play the full Malice turnout right now and give them maybe 2 draws. I think 2 draws is all I would give if I was doing that. And I think I went in with like Allied and like a trap card, which is more than enough through a hand trap. You know, that's basically the full board. And they discarded the Meows, one of their most impactful hand traps that can also be stopped by things like Droll and Called By and Ash Blossom, right? We're losing to all of those cards, opening ourselves up to losing to all of those cards, and we are gaining very minimal out of it. And that is our best matchup, right? Like against Mitsurugi, you can technically drop this on your turn, which will give you a guaranteed draw when they do the Murakumo thing. If they have Futsu up, it's kind of giving them a floodgate that they have to deal with if they decide if they want to give you any draws or not. Basically, it's going to turn off Futsu because no one's going to give you a draw to get a random body. The Murakumo is going to give you a guaranteed draw, so it's probably fine there. But to be honest, this card's just not worth playing, man. It has a funny interaction versus Lunalight, but if you Meow as a Lunalight player, they're just going to give you like 1 draw in with a Liger, which you're not beating. Or maybe 2 Ligers, or maybe 2 Ligers and a Baguska. It's just not a good enough card, honestly, in this current format to play. And even though it's an Earth monster, once again, that's not really a valid reason for playing it in Vanquish Souls. That's not the attributes you need. Going forward, I am going to go ahead and bring up Gamma and Delta at the same time here. I think that Gamma in itself is broken, but as we've talked about before, there's one key factor of Gamma that we definitely need to keep in mind when choosing our deck choices, and that is Driver. That card blows, man. It is terrible. It stinks. It truly sucks. It is a level 6 normal monster. A psychic soldier rides into battle. Who cares? It stinks. And having to play a 1-to-1 brick ratio is not an excuse to play that card, realistically. So people are forcing Delta into their deck, even though it's more of a suboptimal card. Here's the deal with Delta, is that there are a lot of spells in this format that are powerful. Things like the Malice Field spell, which a lot of them are using their combos now, not even just as like a backup card to search, or like the quick play spell to search. They're using this in their combo, so Delta does hit that. It also hits the Mitsurugi Ritual. Permanently cutting off the fact that they could summon a Mitsurugi monster from their hand is fantastic. There's not very many cards that do that. It's pretty much just Delta and Impulse right now that would do that. You can also hit Cross with this. So if your opponent starts with Ryzeal cards before accessing their Mitsurugi, you can use Delta on the Cross to make sure that your other hand trap would go through, which is really unique there. You can also use this on things like Cross Out, Call By, things that would stop your other hand traps. But to be honest, I don't know how I feel about these cards, man. Having to play like a 4-to-1 brick ratio is still not the best. And really, they can't be normal summoned like I was mentioning earlier to kind of put the bodies on the field. But the payoff is very strong for Gamma. So maybe it's probably something closer to this. Like Delta is definitely better than Purge, but Ghost Ogre is definitely... Ghost Ogre is better than Delta, and then Gamma is definitely better than both. So it's probably something like this. You're really happy when you see the Gamma. You're pretty happy when you see Delta, but you are extremely sad when you see Driver. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when putting these cards in your deck. We have Nib. I think this card stinks right now, man. I usually love Nib. There's an old DB Grinder quote that I used to say a lot, which was, one Nib usually trades with a negate. Because back in the day, there used to be negates everywhere. It was Griffin Rider. It was Baron, right? All of these negates, even Savage, it forced exactly one negate out. But the thing was, if you opened Nib plus another hand trap, it traded with their entire board if you used it right. If you Ash Blossom and forced them to use their negate, you nibbed them for everything. If you Veilered plus the nib, it traded for everything if you did it right. The only thing is that versus Vanquish Soul right now, they are never summoning more than 4 times. The only time they're really doing that is like if you hand trap them in a few different weird spots and they decide that they want to extend or try to dodge the interaction by using a Borger or a Caesar that they hard drew to play through it. That's like really the only time that you'll see them summon more than 5 times. Versus Malice, almost all of them, I think every Malice combo plays around Nib now. Even the White Rabbit one to an extent, because you're kind of setting yourself up to play a different way. But to be honest, like, it's just not going to be that impactful versus Malice. And even if you're nibbing them and challenging them having Link Spider, I think every Malice list I've seen from the past year has played Link Spider in it, you know, or maybe not a year, but like the past 3 months. You guys know what I'm talking about. Nib basically is just having no effect against the decks right now unless you have another hand trap with it. So I think if your deck's not playing something close to like 18 hand traps, Nib is not even in consideration to play. There is a clause that I want to talk about for just a second here with Nib. I think that if your deck can search Nib as a card on top of its board, that's totally different. One thing specifically is like Lunalight. Some people are making Gallant Grant to search Nib on top of their board because that really helps their Malice matchup. And really their matchup versus anything that tries to combo through the Ligers that it makes, because the Nib is not going to affect your Ligers. I think in that instance, it's totally fine to play Nib. Look at the Mitsurugi board. Some people were searching Nib in that deck because when you Nib, it's going to trigger all of your Mitsurugi names. So even if they did something to stop you, right, you're going to be able to Nib your own cards to trigger them. I think it's fine if you're searching it as a go first card because they're not going to be able to play through the interactions you have and the Nib. The interactions that your board generally created on its own are kind of the secondary hand trap that pairs with Nib normally. So in that instance, I think Nib is phenomenal, but it does have its definite restrictions here. Moving forward, we have Bystials. Bystials are absolutely insane. I think Bystials are more needed than probably Impulse. I think, like, honestly, the hand traps you should be main decking. It's probably something like these 3 here. We'll get to Droll as well. I think Droll's definitely one that you should main deck. But Bystials are phenomenal. If your deck can play Bystials, it should definitely be doing it. The decks that can't play Bystials are anything with a Ryzeal in it, because X Ryzeal is one of the most absurd cards that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever made. And hindering yourself for some funny reason because you want to play a cute tech of a Bystial Druisworm or a Magnema is just It's ridiculous. It's not logical thinking. You know, we want to prioritize our broken card. That's why we're playing this deck, right? We're playing a deck with X Ryzeal in it because X Ryzeal is broken. Why are we going to make X Ryzeal worse to play a card that is not as good as X Ryzeal? It's the way I think of it. So why ruin that for our deck? So we're not going to play this in a deck with X Ryzeal. We can play it in. We can play it in Lunalight. We can play it in Vanquish Soul. We're sure going to do that. We need Dark Monsters to reveal anyways. We're absolutely going to play these in there. We're going to play this in Malice. It's an extender for our own engine. We're going to play this in probably Fire King, Pure Mitsurugi, all of these other decks that play like engines and hand traps with them, unless they have X Ryzeal on it. That's pretty much the only time that you're not going to be playing Magnemite or Druid Swarm or any other Bystial for that matter. Then we have Droll. I think Droll, honestly, may be more needed than Fuallos in this metagame. Depending on what deck we're talking about, I think that there is an argument for playing Fuallos in Vanquish Soul, but I don't think there's an argument for playing Droll in the main deck of your Vanquish Soul deck. It just doesn't have that same positive trade to it where you're trying to unfair them with your strategy. Like, that's what Vanquish Soul does. It tries to unfair you going second. Whether it's with Fantasme, Fuallos, Holy Sue, you try to unfair them out of the game when you're going second and basically just use your engine as hand traps and play 40 hand traps versus them. But for every other deck, Lunalight, even Kashtira, like literally every deck in the format, that's all I'm getting to, should be playing Droll in it because it's going to stop you from getting unfaired. Droll always puts them on a half board. Whether it's Detonator Pass, whether it's Cryptor Pass, or Red Ransom with the Quick Play Spell Pass, it's a half board, right? That is a minimized board of what it could be. So playing something that's going to filter that through and try to make it as a more condensed, smaller board, force them onto their backup plan. Usually your engine can play through that. And if your engine can't play through that, we're probably playing the wrong deck. But for right now, we absolutely need to be playing Droll, especially if your deck can play under Droll itself, because that means that if they do unfair you and they activate Pirellia or Fuallos or both of them, you can Droll yourself to try to minimize those cards and cut them off. The only deck that Droll is not phenomenal against is Malice. But here's the deal with Malice, it's still cutting them off. It's still making their board smaller. If you go look at any spreadsheet for Malice, the combo under Droll is smaller. It simply is. When you're going second, or when Malice is going second and you Droll them, it doesn't feel like it makes their board smaller. They still climb up to access code, they full combo. But when they're going first, it does hinder their board. Look at just any inboard comparison. The other thing is for Vanquish Soul, Droll is not guaranteed to make their board smaller. If they start with normal summon raise and they add Holy Sue and you Droll them, the only thing that's really cutting them off is the field spell and the trap. But a lot of them end up playing like several copies of either the field spell or like a trap or like quick play spell. So there's a good chance they end up getting to some sort of back row interaction anyways. But I think that honestly Droll is worth playing at that matchup still, just because the odds that they open Raisin are lower. They have more cards that search Raisin than cards that actually are Raisin. So Drolling is still a fantastic idea versus that deck. And this is the last card. This is Skullmeister here. I think that this card is worth talking about, even though I don't think it's the best. It's definitely in consideration for cards that you can play for Vanquish Soul because it's a Dark Monster. It's a level 4 monster as well, so you can use it to randomly make your Xyz monsters. The only thing that I dislike about Skullmeister is it has almost no interaction versus Ryzeal. You can use it to hit their Twins of the Eclipse. That's about it. You can use this against the Mitsurugi cards pretty effectively. If they start with Habakiri, Summon Saji, Tribute Saji, Skullmeister right there is pretty unique because it's going to stop them from getting the Mitsurugi Ritual in rotation. But honestly, it's just not better than any of the other cards we mentioned here. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to put it not good enough. That's going to leave just one guy down here in Homeless. Just Cherries. This card's awful. Probably always will be. But I appreciate you guys watching the video. If you had any other thoughts about things, leave them in the comment section down below. I really would like to hear what you guys think about this. As always, whether you guys like my videos or whatever, I appreciate your support. If you guys would not mind leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, I'd appreciate it. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.